Some words echo long after the voice that said them is gone. You don't consciously replay them, yet they quietly guide how you evaluate yourself. They show up when you hesitate before speaking, when you dismiss your own disappointment, when you feel a flash of anger and immediately explain it away. Often, the words weren't shouted. Some were said casually, even jokingly. But children don't hear words casually. A child's brain is still building its internal map of the world, and parents, by default, are the cartographers. When certain words are repeated across childhood, they don't just hurt in the moment. They shape how the nervous system reacts, how the mind interprets events, and how identity forms. The damage isn't always what we prepared for. It's structural. In this sense, as a child or parent, we will see some of the toxic words parents say to their children that hurt them and haunt their ego and confidence as they grow. One of the most common toxic words used by most parents is some variation of "stop crying, it's not a big deal." On the surface, it sounds like emotional efficiency, but developmentally, it teaches something specific. Your internal experience is unreliable. Children don't yet know how to scale emotional intensity. Their prefrontal cortex, which eventually helps regulate reactions, is still under construction. When an adult dismisses a feeling instead of helping regulate it, the child learns to override rather than integrate. Over time, that override becomes automatic. The adult who heard this repeatedly often feels sadness and immediately minimizes it. "I'm overreacting. It's stupid." They may struggle to identify what they're feeling at all. That difficulty isn't personality, it's learned suppression, reinforced through years of emotional invalidation. Another phrase sounds practical, but cuts deeply. "Because I said so." Authority is necessary, but when reasoning is consistently withheld, children internalize obedience over understanding. Instead of learning cause and effect, they learn hierarchy and fear of consequence. The brain adapts by focusing on avoiding punishment rather than evaluating right and wrong. As adults, this can show up in subtle ways: difficulty making independent decisions, excessive reliance on external validation, anxiety when authority figures disapprove. The internal logic becomes safety equals compliance. Then there's the comparison that hurt even more. "Why can't you be more like your sibling?" Or "Look at other kids at your age." Comparison rewires motivation. Instead of pursuing growth out of curiosity or mastery, the child learns that worth is relative. Identity becomes contingent on outperforming others. The reward system in the brain becomes tightly linked to social ranking. This doesn't just produce competitiveness, it produces chronic insecurity. Even success feels unstable because someone, somewhere, is doing better. Adults shaped by comparison often feel uneasy during achievements. The mind scans for who surpassed them. Satisfaction never fully lands. Another word that seems harmless: "You're too sensitive." Children rely on caregivers to help them calibrate emotional intensity. When sensitivity is labeled as a defect rather than temperament, the child internalizes shame around their emotional depth. They may begin suppressing reactions to avoid ridicule. Neurologically, emotional suppression requires effort. The body still reacts, with heart rate shifts, cortisol rises, but expression is inhibited. Chronic inhibition increases stress load over time. The adult version of this child may pride themselves on being low maintenance while privately feeling unseen and chronically tense. A different kind of toxicity hides in conditional approval. "I'm proud of you when you win." Praise linked only to performance teaches that love and approval are transactional. The attachment system becomes performance-based. Children wired this way grow into adults who equate productivity with worth. Rest triggers guilt. Failure triggers disproportionate self-criticism. Even more destabilizing is, "You're lucky I do so much for you." This reframes caregiving, a parental responsibility, as a favor. Gratitude becomes an obligation. The child learns that their needs create a burden. They may grow hyper-independent, refusing help even when overwhelmed, because needing others feels dangerous or shameful. Another phrase that embeds deeply: "Don't talk back." Respect matters, but when any disagreement is framed as disrespect, children don't learn assertiveness, they learn suppression. They disconnect from their own reasoning to preserve safety. Later in life, boundary setting feels confrontational even when it's appropriate. "You always" and "you never" statements also shape identity. These global character judgments bypass behavior and target the self. The child doesn't just think, "I made a mistake," they think, "I am careless." Repetition of these labels strengthens neural pathways that associate self-concept with flaw. Children believe what's repeated. Their cognitive schemas are forming. If lazy, dramatic, or difficult are echoed often enough, they become internal descriptors. Then there's emotional reversal. "After everything I've done for you." This phrase introduces guilt as a control mechanism. The child's autonomy becomes entangled with parental sacrifice narratives. Healthy individuation, the process of becoming a separate self, gets complicated by chronic indebtedness. As adults, these individuals often overextend in relationships. They feel responsible for others' emotions. Saying no triggers disproportionate guilt, not because the request is unreasonable, but because the nervous system equates refusal with relational threat. Another destabilizing message is, "You're embarrassing me." Instead of focusing on behavior, this makes the child responsible for the parent's social image. Social belonging is critical in early development. Linking love to public performance creates hyper-awareness of others' perceptions. The adult outcome often includes social anxiety, people-pleasing, or chronic self-monitoring. Sometimes the toxicity is subtler. "That never happened." When a child's memory is consistently denied, their reality testing skills weaken. This isn't simply disagreement, it's experiential invalidation. Over time, the child learns to distrust their own perception. They may grow into adults who second-guess recollections, defer to stronger personalities, or feel confused during conflict. There's also the phrase delivered with sarcasm: "You're so dramatic."
Sarcasm bypasses direct aggression while still communicating contempt. The child learns that vulnerability invites mockery, emotional self-disclosure decreases, detachment increases. Humor may become a defense mechanism, not because they're naturally detached, but because authenticity once felt unsafe. And finally, perhaps the most corrosive, "I wish you were different." Children interpret this literally, not "I wish your behavior was different," but "who you are is insufficient." Identity formation relies heavily on reflected acceptance. When the mirror repeatedly shows disappointment, self-concept distorts. None of these words operates in isolation. Repetition creates conditioning. The developing brain is highly plastic. Neural circuits strengthen with use. If guilt is used frequently as control, guilt becomes a default emotional regulator. If comparison is constant, self-evaluation becomes externally anchored. If emotions are dismissed, internal awareness dulls. Over time, these patterns integrate into personality structures. A child who learned that love follows achievement may become highly driven. From the outside, this looks adaptive. Inside, it's fragile. Motivation is fueled by fear of disapproval rather than intrinsic curiosity. A child who learned that disagreement equals disrespect may become agreeable and cooperative, again, adaptive, until resentment builds because their own needs remain chronically unexpressed. The persistence of these patterns is not accidental. The brain prefers familiarity, even painful familiarity. Internal narratives formed early become efficient mental shortcuts. They require less cognitive effort than reevaluating foundational beliefs. If you were repeatedly told you were too much, you may now preemptively shrink. It feels like a choice, but it's a prediction. Your nervous system anticipates rejection and adjusts before it happens. There is also reinforcement. These patterns often produce short-term relational stability. People-pleasing avoids conflict. Perfectionism earns praise. Emotional suppression prevents arguments. The immediate reward strengthens the behavior, even if long-term costs accumulate. And so the cycle continues into adulthood, often unconsciously replicated in workplaces, friendships, romantic relationships, and even parenting. Breaking these patterns requires something uncomfortable, slowing down automatic interpretation. If sadness arises and the immediate thought is, "This is stupid," pause there. That phrase likely has history. Instead of debating whether the feeling is justified, name it neutrally. Labeling emotions reduces physiological intensity. It engages regulatory circuits that weren't fully supported in childhood. When guilt surfaces after saying no, examine its source. Is the guilt proportional to the harm caused, or is it a conditioned response to autonomy? Separating present reality from past conditioning is gradual work. It involves cognitive restructuring, questioning inherited assumptions rather than accepting them as fact.
For those shaped by comparison, practice internal metrics. Instead of, "Am I better than them?" shift toward, "Did I improve relative to myself?" This redirects reward systems toward mastery rather than hierarchy. If performance-based worth drives you, experiment with small acts of rest without earning them. Notice the anxiety. Don't eliminate it immediately. Observe it. The nervous system learns safety through repeated exposure to non-performance states. For individuals who struggle with boundaries, begin with low-stakes assertions. Express minor preferences. Tolerate the discomfort. Autonomy strengthens through repetition. And perhaps most importantly, update identity consciously. Early labels were assigned during cognitive immaturity. Reevaluate them. Are they evidence-based or emotionally inherited? Identity is not fixed, it's constructed and revised through narrative reinterpretation. None of this is about blaming parents in simplistic terms. Many of these words were themselves inherited. Stress, cultural norms, and unexamined beliefs shape language. But understanding origin doesn't require denying impact. Language builds structure. Structure shapes expectation. Expectation guides behavior. When you hear your own internal voice dismissing, comparing, shaming, or guilting, there's a high probability that it learned that tone somewhere. Recognizing that doesn't excuse harmful behavior in adulthood. It clarifies responsibility. Because once you can hear the borrowed voice, you have options. You can interrupt it. You can choose a language with yourself that supports regulation rather than suppression. You can separate obedience from integrity. You can shift motivation from fear of rejection to the pursuit of meaning. Not overnight, not perfectly, but incrementally. The words that shaped you were repeated over the years. Revision also requires repetition. Children absorb words as truth because they have no alternative framework. Adults have the capacity to examine the framework. The echoes may remain, but they don't have to stay in charge.